Hey guys, so today I'm going to do a quick demo. This is pumpkin chocolate chip cookies. The recipe is right here. You can find it under the Files tab in your Microsoft Teams. The reason I'm doing this recipe is because, one, it's a great review of quick breads, and secondly, it has a lot of different functions when it comes to measuring, and I want to do a review of measuring without insulting you, but just to make sure that you are clear. And if you are not clear, whenever we get back into the kitchen, please make sure that you ask a question before you do what you think is right, if you're kind of on the fence whether it's right or wrong, because what we do is for customers, unlike Culinary One. So, and I expect most of you to know this, but this might answer some questions. Okay. So what we have is we have our fats, we have sugar, we have pumpkin, we have our leavener, we have our dry ingredients, which I'm going to add a little bit more to when we get there. I have a butter knife, I have my eggs, and I have a stand mixer, and I have the paddle attachment. Okay. So first thing that the recipe says is to combine and cream the sugar and the butter and shortening. And so the word cream, if you remember, means to incorporate air into fat and sugar. So first thing I am going to do is I'm going to take my sugar, and I measured this by volume, which means I scooped and I scraped to get the right amount of sugar. This is 1 cup of sugar. And then I have my fat. I have 3 ounces of butter, unsalted, and I have 3 ounces of shortening. And I did this by weight. So I put it on my scale. I put the plate on the scale. I hit tare to zero it. I added 3 ounces of this, then 3 ounces of that. And then we're just going to add all of this, okay? Remember, recipes, if we all measure the same, and they're a good recipe, then we should all come out with similar products. And so the reason I'm showing you this is so you have a similar product to mine. Any recipe that I give you, unless I say otherwise, will be tried and true and tested. And if it is not, I will let you know. So if something messes up with any of your recipes and be like, I did everything correct, you should really look inward, and we can evaluate what you might have done wrong. Because like this recipe, if I give this to you and it doesn't work, well, then we need to evaluate how you measured, how you baked, all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start on low, and then once everything is kind of mixed in, I'm going to kick it up to high, and then you'll see what happens. Okay, so you see that at this point, it's getting incorporated, but there's still some like chunky stuff. So this is where you go in there with your rubber spatula and you scrape it down. If you need to scrape the stuff off your rubber spatula, the paddle is always a good place to do that. We're going to put this back in there. We're going to lock the head down. We're going to start it on low again. And this is where we're going to kick it up. And we're just going to let it go until it's a nice smooth consistency and we incorporate a little bit of air. Okay. So it's been going for like 2 or 3 minutes, and you can see how it looks all light and fluffy now. It is one consistency, but it's very light in color. And whenever you add air to a food by mixing it, it will always lighten up. It will always become more white. So at this point, it says mix in pumpkin and eggs until combined. So my pumpkin is 3/4 of a cup. So I used a 1/2 cup and I used a 1/4 cup, which will give me the right amount. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to use my rubber spatula, and I'm going to get every little bit out. And you can see that there's not a lot of waste in there, which is exactly what we want. And then my eggs. So it calls for 1.5 eggs. And you're like, well, how do you get 1.5 eggs? What I did is I put a bowl on a scale and I cracked 1 egg. I mixed it and it was 50 grams. And so what I did is I poured off 25 and then I put in another egg. So now I need to mix this. And actually, you know what? I don't need to mix it. Why? Because the mixer's gonna mix it. If you notice, which you probably can't see on the video, is I'm putting all of my dirty dishes just out of the way. And at this point, while this is mixing, that would be the time while I'm bringing that to the dish room, cleaning up my station, make sure everything is nice and tidy. Because if you wait, if you just like stand there and then wait until the end to clean up, you're gonna have a ton to clean up. But if you do it a little bit at a time, it goes a lot faster. Okay, so head down, locked. We'll start on low because there's a liquid in there. We don't want it sloshing out. And then we're gonna mix it until it's nice. Now at this point, it's a nice consistency. I know it looks like it's kind of broken, like the fat is pulling away from the pumpkin, but I mean, it's as mixed as it's going to get. And I will say at one point I did stop and scrape down the sides. So in the recipe, now it says to add remaining dry ingredients. And those dry ingredients are salt, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, which is right all in here, cinnamon, allspice, ginger, baking soda, baking powder. And actually my baking soda and baking powder are right here. And they work differently. So you can't just add one, and they're not interchangeable. And we're gonna go into that a lot more because baking powder is an acid and an alkali, and baking soda is just an alkali, but we will cover that more in class. So first thing I'm gonna do is mix that in. And this is what makes it a quick bread. This is what, these two things are what make it rise or make it leaven. Leavening means rise. If we were adding yeast, this would be a yeast bread. And then I'm gonna add all of my dry ingredients, which is the 2 cups of flour and everything else. Now, the one thing I did not add was my allspice. And the reason I didn't is because I wanna review how to get 1/8 of a teaspoon. Because unless you have a really fancy teaspoon set, you don't have 1/8 of a teaspoon. This is a 1/4 teaspoon. And what I like to do is called the dip method, is I'm just gonna take it straight up and down, and I'm gonna dip it in halfway. And then if you can see that, it's filled literally halfway, which would be 1/8 of a teaspoon. If you ask chefs, they will say that 1/8 of a teaspoon is a pinch. Well, my pinch is different than your pinch. Like, I mean, some of us might have the same size pinch, but if we want to make this consistent, if we want to make this restaurant quality, we want it all to be the same. So that is how you get 1/8 of a teaspoon. Okay, now we're going to mix this in slowly. And this is another time that you want to start it off on slow, because if you mix it out on high, you're just going to get all your ingredients everywhere, and then your ratios of ingredients are off, and you're not going to have a good product. Okay, so we're going to start off on slow, and let's mix it in. Scraping down periodically. So we are done. It's all nice and mixed together. It looks really nice. That's exactly the way it should look. And so now it's time to add the chocolate chips, which is normally the last thing that we do. Here's my scale. I put it on my scale. I already zeroed it, or sometimes it says tare. I'm gonna set it to ounces. What we have here is a bag of chocolate chips, but these are the minis or the morsels. And so I like these in a lot of chocolate chip cookies because I feel like they disperse a lot better. And it calls for half a bag, and so which would be 5 ounces. And this is the kind of thing that you would think like maybe adding more chocolate chips would be a good thing, but I mean, if you mess up that ratio, a lot of times what can happen is they can burn. And so you don't want to mess up that ratio because it can have adverse effects down the line. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix in my chocolate chips, and I'm gonna mix them up, and then we'll see what it looks like, and then we'll be pretty good. So at this point we are done mixing, so we're gonna shut it off. And because you are mixing so much, it actually warms the batter up a lot. So what we want to do is we want this to chill down a little bit. So I'm gonna just scrape down my paddle, and then after I scrape down my paddle, I'm gonna put my dough or batter in the refrigerator for like a half an hour to an hour just to get it to chill up. And the reason that you do that is because if it's too hot or too warm going into the oven, they're gonna spread too far and you'll get thin cookies, and sometimes they'll even crack, which is the fat leaking out of the cookie. So we wanna make sure that we have a nice cookie. This is also a great time where you would be either cleaning up or you setting up your pans, stuff like that. Okay, see you in 30 minutes. Okay, so here we are. This was in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes and it's nice and cold on the outside. If you let it sit overnight, it could get to be hard as a rock. So you don't really want to let it sit too long. You can, but you might need to let it sit out a little bit so it's not too cold. I have a couple sheet pans here with some parchment on it. If you don't have parchment, you can always spray your sheet pans, but obviously that makes a huge mess. Normally at school we have dishers, or some people call them ice cream scoops, but their real name is disher, and they come in different sizes. So I have a tablespoon right here. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm just gonna give it a little spray. So when you do this, a normal way at home is to take like 2 spoons, because these are technically drop cookies, is take a spoon and like scrape it off. That's the home method. The restaurant method is to actually use a disher so they're all exactly the same, because the last thing that you want is for one person to get a larger cookie than someone else. So all I'm gonna do is take a little bit of my batter, I'm gonna scrape it along the side, I'm gonna use one finger and take it out. And that's normally, so you get about the same size. Disher is really nice because you can already see like the method I'm using here, they're slightly off. So you want them just to be about the same. And I'll just do the whole tray. Okay, so now that I have my tray completely full, if you notice, I did kind of a pattern. I did 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. It's almost like basketball defense. And so this should give them enough room, because as they cook, they're going to spread out a little bit. It gives them enough room to spread out without touching each other. And I used the most that I can do out of my pan. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this one in the oven, and I am gonna set it for 12 minutes, because it's 12 to 15 minutes, and then see where I'm at. And then I'm gonna load my next tray. And by the time I load my next tray, this tray should be done. So see you in a couple minutes. Okay, so they just came out of the oven, and it wound up taking 15 minutes. But you can see that even because I used the tablespoon rather than the disher, they still are pretty even sized. And I knew that they needed more time than 12 minutes, because if you look at the bottom, see how that's like GBD, golden brown? That's exactly what you're looking for. They're still really hot. They need to cool. You can cool them on a wire rack or just like right on the pan. You don't want to stack them too quickly though, because the moisture can make them stick together. If you notice, I've already, by the time the first pan is out, I've already panned up all the rest, because I have 4 sheet pans. So I got just shy of 4 sheet pans. I got 49 cookies out of this half batch. And if you notice, there's nothing left in the bowl. When I see your bowls go back to dish room, they better look like this. I guess that's all I really need to say. So yeah, so that's cookies. Hopefully you guys will be making them soon in the class.